pretend to be a speaker. So I'm going to show. No, you ran away with a headset. I need a headset. That's okay. Don't worry. So, all right. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. I think I will need your help because I don't know how to set it up and I have only one hand. Alrighty. You've been really kind and patient. This is to your left. Okay, this is to my left. Let me just show it over here. Okay. So like. No. Like.
All right. So I'd like to introduce Vitaly Friedman.
Oh, excellent. Avi, what are you doing on stage? You really like hijacking the stage, don't you?
Of course. So, Vitaly, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you.
Someone needs to introduce you properly.
Sorry, what do you mean?
Someone needs to introduce you properly, right? Fixing frustrating design problems.
Oh. Excellent, Avi, well done. Well, it's a pleasure for me to be back here, actually. I really like talking way more than I like emceeing, to be honest. I could be doing this forever, and I literally did it. My world record is 7 hours, 22 minutes of this, which is where I just went to a meetup, and we stayed and we got pizza, and it actually ended up finishing at around midnight. I'm not promising that this is going to be like that today, unless you have no other plans, but I want to share with you some stories and some interesting thing that I happened to discover over the last couple of years. You can hear me okay? Yes? Okay, excellent. And I want to start from the beginning. From the beginning, for me, is, and I need audio for this. Ready? I need audio. Okay, I'm just going to plug in, hoping that it's going to work. Should I? Or it will be automatically work? We don't know. We'll find out. Should I just play audio and it will play? All right, well, who knows? Well, I want to start from the very start. And the start for me is this. Anybody remembers this? Yeah, so some people remember. Now, this was the starting point for me. This is not when I got to the web, right? But this is the time when I got very, very excited about the computers in general. Actually, I never finished playing because I never knew how to finish. It's only when 15 or 20 years later, when I watched a video play, like this through play on YouTube, when I actually realized how, you get to the end. Anybody finish the game? Oh, wow. 4 people. We should work on this a bit more. So this was a time when I spent a lot of time in front of computers. And then eventually I got to this site. Anybody remembers this site? You remember it? Anybody else? Yes, this is surely Flash. Okay, one person? One person? Okay. So this website was designed 27 years ago. This site is older than some of you sitting in this room, right? This was not Flash back then. It was Macromedia Preview, Shockwave. And I was so excited when I saw this. I thought, this is the future. This is really changing. I want to do this for a living. And so when I came to the site for the very first time back in 1998, this is what gets me all fascinated and excited about it. And then, of course, time evolved, and then I found things like this, which is incredible. This was a design that was done by a creative artist from Barcelona back in 2008, which was Ivan Ferreira, and this is his kind of way of selling his CDs, I guess. Was it CDs back then, I guess we were selling? Right? And this is like, anybody knows how this works, by the way? Some people don't. That's cool. It's like, it's like a month ago, this is a very off topic, but a month ago I met the first person who really exists who did not know what Internet Explorer is. Yes, there was one person that I met, he didn't really know what Internet Explorer is. I was like, this is the time changer. This changes everything for me, right? So this is video text, and the kind of video text meets internet. You can click on numbers, you can also type them in. It was actually incredible in user interaction for me back then. I was very, very excited. Now, moving forward, of course, we're gonna get to incredible things. Like this is probably one of the favorite websites that I've seen in years, which is a puppet theater website from Poland. Look at this cookie pop-up, it's incredible. It's beautiful, and they have this metaphor of kind of playful puppets playing, and it's really nice. It's really incredible, just beautiful. But I asked myself, how did we come to the world where instead of having this all over the web, we got to seeing this all over the web? That's not exciting, and I sometimes feel like, okay, I'm sitting down in front of an interface like this, and I need to take a cup of coffee or tea or water, anything. Let's have a chat. Let's go through all the password requirements that are required for you to read. They actually need to change a password, right? And then it keeps going and going. Sometimes I'm wondering, why do we do it so hard for people? And it's like really a game, right? You keep going, okay, this is fine and this is fine, but why are these characters specifically not acceptable? That's just weird. And then I discovered this. The weirdest thing ever. I think that my life changed when I saw this for the first time. If you want to sign up for a newsletter, you can make it a bit harder for people to do that. You add a newsletter sign up to your shopping cart. With that shopping cart, you check out where you have to also type in your email and first name and last name. Luckily, that email newsletter sign up is free. That's good, right? So then you get a confirmation about your purchase on your email. Then you click on the link that will drive you to where? To a newsletter page where you can fill in your email to subscribe to that email list. What? What is going on in this world? And then, of course, we get this. Anybody excited about this? Beautiful, isn't it? Well, we don't see it that much because it has reincarnated in a different shape. We have crosswalks. I don't know about you, but I have this real difficult problem every morning I wake up. Because when I look at those things like here, I always wonder, this pixel, is it still a crosswalk or not, technically? Do I need to get this right? Or is it okay? Anybody feels the same? Oh, wow, there are a lot of people. Like, it's like really a game. I'm not born to be playing these games. I want to play Prince of Persia on the web. And instead, we are playing these games all over the internet, right? And then I get to this incredible interfaces like this. I'm checking in for a flight, and I have to type in my date of birth. I cannot use my keyboard, so I have to actually use that widget. It takes me 53 seconds to type in the date of my birth. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that many people, like myself, remember their date of birth, right? I don't need to be reminded how old I am, right? I don't need to go through the decades in order to understand where is then my date. Was it like Friday? I need to look it up. Was it Tuesday? I don't remember. I don't need to do that, right? So maybe here, actually having something as simple as an input field would work better. And then we get this. Ooh, it's coming. When we combine time and date, I start questioning life at this point, right? I mean, there is nothing bad at having 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 separate input fields as long as they're predictable. And why are we doing this? And in fact, how do we talk about this? I mean, we could say this is great design, this is bad design. But it's very kind of personal to many of us. How can you be more objective about it? So very much like Shaval was saying, I was working over the last couple of years in very complex environments, working with governments, insurance companies, and so on. And there, when I walk in those companies, nobody trusts me. Like, nobody trusts me. Because I come in an organization, like, for example, European Parliament, where I'm working right now, and you have, a lot of people involved, like tens of thousands of people involved. And then I come in as an independent consultant, telling them how to do their job better. Who would trust me? Nobody would trust me. So I have to really work for some sort of KPIs to prove that what I'm doing is actually reasonable. So we'll be doing a lot of those things and kind of covering this a little bit more detail tomorrow in the workshop if you come, right? But this is what we had to do. We had to establish design KPIs. And I think very often we don't even think about this enough. We don't think about, okay, well, let's design it this way, or let's design it that way. But I cannot just design randomly, right? I need to be very strategic, very deliberate, and very precise in what I'm doing. Because everything that I'm doing has to be proved. So I have to say, okay, we had this design, now we have that design, and with this new design, we improved this, and this. And usually, the most important metrics for that would be task completion rates, or success rates, and also task completion times. But also error frequency, how often errors appear, and also how quickly people can recover from those errors. So this has become a fundamental part of the design. And so again, tomorrow we'll look at this, but it took me 8 months until we actually get to the first screen on the page, because a lot of stuff was about establishing and measuring those design KPIs. So let's take a look at how we can apply that. And just say a couple of examples of how we can make some relatively simple and predictable things a little bit better. And one of them relates, of course, to the wonderful thing that we all learned to hate or love over the years, which was designing or is designing for touch. we seem to have learned a lot about it. We've been using our mobile for many, many years. And of course, many times when you're looking at articles about it, you'll find something like this. This touch some areas, where some areas are easier to tap, and the others are more difficult to tap. Now that, of course, really heavily depends on the task you have at hand, right? So that really will depend whether you're playing a game, whether you're going through an image gallery, and so on and so forth. But what's really important to understand is that there is no universal way of how people hold devices, and how people interact with devices. So it is very common, for example, that depending on a device and where it's placed and how far away the eye is from the device, the people will be tapping differently. They will be tapping on different areas as well. So this is what it usually would look like when somebody reads an article. Now I'm going to show it for a moment, and you tell me if you find something that's a little bit unusual. Or is it just regular? Right? So nothing special, right? Anybody notice anything? Yes, yes, indeed. What you find is that we are used to kind of F pattern on the web. It doesn't really necessarily apply as is on mobile. You will see there's jumps happening, and this is somebody reading, of course. But there is a lot of referring back up and then jumping back down. There's a lot of jumps all the way. This is actually a little bit unusual on mobile, but you will find this, I mean, in general, but you will find it a lot on mobile. So while we're talking about F-shape pattern, anybody knows about F-shape pattern, right? We actually need to really look into this in a bit more detail. If you look into the article, the original article that was published by Norman Nielsen Group back in 2009, I think, they revised this article. There is not only F-shaped pattern now. There are actually many of them. I think there are 8 or so established patterns. Especially on mobile, it is going to be very, very different. This really shows up in very unusual scenarios. Like, for example, if you start looking at interfaces maybe like this, you see it all over the place. We have cards. We maybe have this accordion showing up, right, on the left, on the right. You have to-do tasks, all those things. User journeys, wizards, doesn't matter. You find it all over the place, right? And in fact, literally everywhere on mobile. Now, when you actually start looking at how people use those devices, right, when they actually interact with those interfaces, you'll find some really surprising findings. For example, if you look at where people tap, this is going to be a very common way of where people tap on the mobile screen. Be it Android device, be it iOS, be it left-handed person or right-handed person, it doesn't matter. Now, why is that? Why do we usually tap in this, condensed spaces? It's a little bit strange, isn't it? We don't tap here at all. We don't tap there at all. It's like all this really strange, almost northern lights appearing. Why is that? Yeah, because this is how we hold the phones, that's number one. And on the other hand, our hands are not transparent most of the time. So we need to be able to consume information that's underneath the fingers, right? And once we do that, we'll find that there are actually a lot of situations where we need to leave people space to scroll. The scrolling is the highest or the most active, or the tapping is the most active in empty areas, right? However, many times we will not find a lot of empty areas. This is becoming a problem in interfaces like this, right? Because people start really getting this really awkward positions when they scroll down. Right? This is working a bit better here, but then here comes the interesting part. So if you have a map, let's say, well, let's say if you had to explore a map of a country or a city where you're currently in, right? Where would you scroll to navigate this map? Okay, let's have a vote, right? Who would scroll here somewhere on the top? Not a single person from what I can see. Okay, who would scroll somewhere here, like scrolling, like tapping and doing this little movement? At the bottom, a few more. Okay, who would tap somewhere in here in the center left? Okay, well, because it's Hebrew right to left, I get that. Who would do it right here on the right in the center? Okay, who would just you don't scroll, you don't tap, you don't okay, some people as well. Interesting. That's usually doesn't happen. Ah, yeah, sure, that will work. You can actually switch and so on, right? So. Yes, that's right. So when you look in data, this is what happens in a left to right, like for left to right audience, right? So people who are going to be using mostly English. Why is that? It's very distinct, that area, right? It's not like all over the place, because people need space in order to consume information. In that case, it would be this area here, and then they need to scroll or tap somewhere. So this is what the behavior is usually going to be. In fact, you can actually find that there's a lot of concentration, right, on those edges where people do not consume information. Now, how does it apply to our interfaces? It seems like, again, very, very abstract in many ways. Well, here's one idea. First of all, whenever you get situations like this, right, where you maybe have a little color picker like that, you might want to click on that one and then change the color of the product. Seems to be like a very common thing, right? So the problem is rage taps or rage clicks, depending on the resolution, right? So people will click and they will have to click again, they will have to click again in order to actually select the color. You know what I'm talking about, right? If you want to avoid that, you would never make people click on those dots. Instead, you will prompt a little preview so people can more comfortably select the color, and you will eliminate these rage taps altogether. In testing, this seems to be performing much better than just having people clicking on the dots. Think about carousels, the same story. Or think about tables, right? On tables, usually we have the little inline actions on the right, on the left, like edit, save, export, things like that. Usually they perform remarkably poorly because people actually not hit them correctly. So having just one bigger button saying actions and then show those actions on click is going to perform better. Now, what does it mean better? It's slower, right? It's slower because people cannot hit that action directly, but they will make much less mistakes, which is actually really, really important. So people don't have to recover from those mistakes, for example, right? Another thing that's also quite interesting is this idea of an assistant pattern on mobile, where if you have a relatively complex interface, like a configurator like this from Tilco, which is a shelf configurator system, right? You can actually build and customize your own shelf, which is really, really cool. What happens is, at some point, you actually get to a really complex beast, right? And to navigate it, you allow people to select with an assistant what exactly you actually mean. Again, no errors can be made there, because if you think about just selecting the right shelf, this is going to cause a lot of frustration, a lot of problems, right? So we can fix that. So all those examples are just really typical for things that we don't often consider. Now let's dive a bit deeper. And let's go into our good old friend, carousels. Anybody excited about carousels? No. Anybody, do I have any fans of carousels? Again, it's a safe space. 2 people, right? Well, I make you fall in love with carousels within the next 20 minutes. So let's see how, no, not like 7 minutes. Let's see how this goes. First of all, there is nothing to hate about carousels. Look at them. How beautiful those carousels can be. There's nothing. They didn't do anything to us. They're great. But when we look at most implementations of a carousel, they perform remarkably badly, right? So this is a very common pattern. We have an arrow on the left. We have an arrow on the right. We have a few dots in between. Dots are always a bad idea to use in carousels. Always. The first thing we need to do is to replace them. We'll see how to do that in a moment, right? But this is a common carousel. We know how this works. We can call it content slider, whatever we want to call it. Well, if we look at the data, how many people actually see the slice number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you'll see that 78% of people realize that they saw the first slice of the carousel, and then position 2, 3, 4, and 5 get like approximately 2%. So we can say, well, carousels don't work, so let's just remove them altogether. But then you do something that's, in order to do some research, right? And so my research is always going to Turkey, or specifically to Turkish websites. Because there is a lot of creativity in Turkish websites, in good way or in maybe not so good way, right? And what you find is, and I was actually very surprised, there are no dots in Turkey. They do not believe in dots and carousels, I guess, right? There are no dots, there are only numbers. There are some exceptions, but most of the time it's just going to be numbers. So why is it done this way? You have a reference, you can refer somebody to slice number 12, right? And of course, in some situations, you get to a lot of those dots, after all. Like, it's a swipe all the way. It's the carousel of the carousels, right? And then you get to some places, and you find there is no dots. Most of the time, there is no dots at all, right? This is my favorite example ever. It's like all the carousels on one single screen. How incredible that is. So you get a horizontal exhibit, had a vertical exhibit, one with the thumbnails, and a content slider right here, all in one screen. How often do you get to see that? That's incredible, right? So if we wanted to improve things, numbers, maybe, what else could we do? Well, here's an interesting idea. So if you look at this website, and you find this thing on the left, can you see it? Hope you can, right? So if you wanted to navigate, and this is the carousel, by the way. So if you wanted to navigate to the previous or the next slide of the carousel, how would you interact with it? Okay, so let's talk through options. Who would try to click here somewhere and do something with this dot? Okay, a lot of people, maybe I would say 45% so. Who would try to, I don't know, click somewhere on this vertical line? Anybody? Maybe, maybe. Who would click on the numbers? Okay, who would do something else? Yes, what would you do? Scroll. All right, so who would scroll? Okay, a lot of people, right? Okay, so if you want to slide to the next slide of the carousel, all of us will be wrong because it works a bit differently. So when we look at this, it might seem almost obvious what you're supposed to do, right? So you get this, is it playing? I think it is playing, it's coming. So you have this drag here. You can click as much as you like. But if you want to change the slides, of course, you have to, well, it's a slider, right? So you slide horizontally. So what is the problem here? I'm not trying to make fun of the website, right? But the thing is, whenever you have this mismatch of expectations of how things will be moving and how things are presented, you're going to get into trouble. This is not only happening on some, dribble demos or anything like that. An actual website. Here's another example, the same story. This is one from Van Gogh Museum in Netherlands, in Amsterdam. Kind of the same thing. Scroll for more, right? So what happens is, actually, you're supposed to scroll vertically in order to navigate, but it actually indicates that you're supposed to scroll horizontally. That's just annoying. And sometimes we just make it really, really complicated. So if you look at, here, we have these dots on the left, and then we have a square, and then sometimes we have a circle, and sometimes they're grouped, and it's really getting really messy and really complicated. It's probably not a good idea to do that, right? The reason is there are categories, there are sections, and we kind of group them in the carousel. That doesn't work. So if you wanted to improve the carousel, what do we do? First of all, not all carousels work badly. So if you look at products pages, if you look at travel agencies or travel sites like booking.com and so on, you'll find that most of the time you see a slightly different distribution of where people click and how often people look at this screen, at the slices of a carousel. The first 3 or 4 slices get a lot of attention, but then as you keep going, actually the attention drops significantly. The first thing we should do, I think, is to remove the dots, whatever that means. It could be just a simple slider at the bottom, because it also indicates how much data or how many slices there are, right? This could be as simple as this. But we can make it a bit more useful too. Like, for example, adding labels instead. So replacing every dot with something that's more contextual. Like this is a label, and so you actually have a reason to click on it. If you have an auto-rotating carousels, it's absolutely critical to have a pause button. Not only because of accessibility. There is also a very, very good other reason for it. If it's auto-moving, like automatically moving, the chance of people scrolling by so quickly that they will not even notice the second one is too high. So if you actually don't have a play button, there is no reason to have a carousel in the first place. You have a very, very low attention rate to those slides of a carousel. Doesn't have to be just labeled though. You can go ahead and turn it into something like a hover previews, images, it could be videos. In this particular case, it's videos, previewing what you expected to see, what you are going to see when you actually click or tap on one of those areas. Actually quite helpful too. And then it disappears to leave the space to the video to play, right? And then it appears again if you actually hover back again. It actually looks like this on mobile, maybe not ideal. It might be a good idea to tilt a little bit less than like 90 degrees, but this would work much better than any dot will ever work, right? Of course, you can also have thumbnails, like here. You can also have some illustrations like this. And then, of course, the main question that appears is, how do we group them? And do we group them? Because this is what bothers me at night. I don't know about you, but this keeps me awake at night. If you think about the ways to navigate the carousel, those arrows, left and right, where should they be? Anybody cannot sleep at night because of that? Not many people, I can tell. That's okay. So you get those things. You have these arrows here. Or you get them somewhat centered in the middle of the screen on images. Or you have them on the top. And sometimes they are grouped. And sometimes they're spread out of each other, right? Distributed mostly. So if I ask you, which one would you prefer for your current project, let's say? Which one would work best? Working best, of course, means most attention, most engagement, right? What do we choose? Who would say, oh, this is great, let's do this? at the bottom of the screen? 4 people, I think 4. Okay, who would say center, right here? Way more, maybe I would say 40, 45%. Who would say here is fine? Okay, maybe 30%. Now from the experiment that I ran, right, this one performs the worst. Why is that? Yes, because you are hiding, I don't have a phone, you are hiding the content. Whenever somebody tries to interact with it, they always have to lift the finger to consume it. So because of this iteration that they have to do repeatedly, they just see fewer slides. Not very surprising. You just make people make more work, right? So what is the second worst? This. Why is that? Yes, it covers the image, but what is the problem with that? So it covers the image. Yeah, you see only one image at a time. Yeah, so it depends, but here the problem is, what happens a lot is that in many of those product pages, this image is a link. It will lead somewhere. It's clickable. So what happens is, people tend to accidentally click on the image because we're really bad at hitting targets. They go to the wrong place, then they return back, then the state of that carousel might have been lost, have to regain the same thing and kind of move to the same slice. It actually causes a lot of frustration for people. Unless you do one thing, which is reserving the padding, enough padding on the edges so people don't make those mistakes. It just needs to be like 45 or 50 pixels more than the actual icon, right? So this one seems to be performing best because whenever you operate this carousel, first of all, you can move left and right very quickly without having to redo ever. You don't make mistakes, and this is just working better. In fact, this is why when you start looking around, there is a lot of almost convention about grouping those things together. My favorite example would be something maybe like this, which is a ritual. And here on desktop, they group those icons together. It's a good idea to group rather than distribute them, by the way, so people can control quickly without having to refocus all the time. So here, you click right, you click left, and it kind of changes. But then, of course, on mobile, it's probably not a good idea to do that. Because on mobile, again, you'll be covering the content that people might want to consume. So instead, we need to do something else on mobile. And in this case, on ritual.com, you have this effect. Let me just make it a little bit faster here, right? Where eventually, on mobile, on the smaller screen, it jumps under the carousel. And it's grouped, and it's on the right. It can also be on the left. It doesn't matter that much, right? Because again, there are left-handed people, right-handed people. But in this case, this is going to be my reference example. If I had to design a carousel, it's probably going to look like this. Big buttons grouped at the bottom right on mobile, at the top right corner on desktop. It can also be the same way on, vertically, kind of the same story. But grouping is actually quite important. And I highly encourage you to test that. You can also find it in content sliders like this as well. Kind of the same story. It doesn't have to be just carousels, of course. All right. Anybody fell in love with carousels now? Disappointing. All right, I have another one. Do I have any friends of Infinite Scroll in the house? Oh, let's have a comment. No, who doesn't like Infinite Scroll, like at all? Okay, maybe I'll make you fall in love with Infinite Scroll as well. Because one of my tasks that I was given is, well, we have this Infinite Scroll experience on our product pages. I'll make it better. And I'm like, I don't like Infinite Scroll, so why do I have to make it better, right? But then this was the job, and I said, okay, what's not to like about Infinite Scroll in the first place? There are only a few issues that we need to fix. It's overwhelming and difficult to manage. Usually it has a high abandonment rate. It's very difficult to spot what is the new thing, a new part, what is the old part. The URL and the address bar is often broken. You can't really bookmark a location and return to it later. It's hard to reach the footer, but who needs the footer anyway, right? You always break the scroll bar because as you start scrolling, it kind of keeps showing up and keep jumping up, right? Have a lot of accessibility issues and performance issues. Great, fantastic. What's not to like? And of course, over the years, we've learned a couple of things. For example, this is a typical implementation of Infinite Scroll. You scroll, and you scroll, and you scroll, and maybe, if you're lucky, you will sometimes hit the footer, but you scroll, and you keep scrolling, and the scroll bar gets updated, and you scroll, because we'll know how to scroll. Do you know how many miles, like thousands, millions of kilometers you have scrolled in your life because of Infinite Scroll? Right? It's just impressive, right? But then, of course, eventually you get to this point where you get just, you've seen enough, and then you have this load more button sometimes, right? So I was supposed to improve it. And of course, my first idea was, let's move to pagination. Pagination didn't perform. It does not necessarily perform better than infinite scroll because it's slower. People have to actually click, and then they have to go to another page, so people actually see fewer products as a result. Infinite scroll can work really well. The problem is we have all these issues I highlighted before. So we used to have this, load more products, and you would be clicking on that button eventually. Like once you've seen enough, like a particular threshold of maybe 80, 85 products, you show this load more button. Then people click, and then we see more. But that's how we usually do this anyway, right? We can improve it. And one thing we could do, and this is what we tested, is why don't we allow people to bookmark a location in that infinite list? Because it can be, again, if you think about the sales page, right, and the e-commerce site, it might be thousands and thousands of products. So you let people just click, okay, continue here later. Next time they come to the page, you can prompt a little thing saying, would you like to continue where you left off last time? And if there are some products that are new in that list, you probably need to highlight them as well, either above that button or like in that that is going to show up. You can also do something else. This is what really worked well for marketing people. I was not working on this project, by the way, but I cannot show the actual project because of NDA. So here we've got this, right, where you actually have that button, and it says, well, or maybe I can actually show this one, that's better. Continue browsing later. Plus, you could win a $350 gift card. Well, yeah, marketing people loved it, so it seems to be working really, performing really, really well. But still, it wasn't good enough, or we actually improve it even more. Because, for example, bookmarking is good, but this is not the only thing that is a problem, right? One problem is footer. We cannot reach the footer. So let's help people reach the footer. Not a problem. So I have a hobby, and every now and again I would go to pick a random country, pick a random industry, and go through all the websites I can find from that country. So here is Damakun, which is a food delivery service from Malaysia. I remember vividly it's a wonderful exercise for Friday night when you have nothing else to do. Friday night is great for Malaysian food delivery service websites. So, or check, or I don't know, whatever you prefer. And so I went in, and here's one, and so you have a sticky footer. Why not? So whenever you need to reach the footer, you have this little thing showing up at the bottom right. You open it up, you get access to the footer immediately. Problem solved. But then I discovered something that changed my life forever. What if we combine pagination and infinite scroll in one? Wow. So I went to pepper.pl, which is a Polish, again, I had my Saturday evening for Polish e-commerce websites, right? Highly recommend. This is an incredible hobby to have. Also a lot of fun with friends who might not approve. That doesn't matter. So this is a site. So as you keep going, keep scrolling down, there is a link that shows up, right, where you can jump to the header, you can jump to the footer. If you pay attention to the URL bar, it changes as you scroll. So it's infinite scroll, but it's also pagination, right? And you can jump to a particular page, right? And in fact, there is this thing where you can click on a particular page here and you can jump right away there. So it's pagination meets infinite scroll. But one day I woke up and I asked myself, why would somebody ever want to click to page 13 in that list? So if I come to a page like this, or to a site like this, why would I want to go to page 13, for example? What's the point of this pagination? How do I know what to find there? So I thought about my visit to IKEA website back in 2012. Oh, I remember that day. That day changed a lot for me. Because back then, in 2012, it was like, what, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I found this. Sorry about the screenshot. We didn't have Retina back then, right? So here we go. And I thought, wow, this is genius. That's so great because we can give some context like we do with carousels to people who are using pagination. We can say, well, I'm sorting by something. It doesn't have to be price. It could be size, could be date, historical date, or anything like that, like 18th century, 15th century, and so on. And you just give some context for people so they know what to expect when they click on page number 5. On page number 5, they find the range between 122 and 199. Ironically, a couple of months later, IKEA removed it, but I got the screenshot. So I'm very proud of that, right? And then you can also apply it in different contexts. If you have infinite scroll, you can't do that, right? Because you don't have a page per se, but you could do this. Wouldn't it be great to have that? So if you're sorting by anything, you could surface that information next to the scroll bar. So people who are sorting by X can find those nuggets of pieces where they can jump to immediately. And why do I not see any single implementation of that? Sometimes it's technical limitations because you cannot get the data from the server quickly enough, right? But you can still fake it in many ways. There are some kind of options of things that you could do. Right? So I would highly encourage you, if you actually do have infinite scroll, and it might be a very good idea to do so, right? Try to think about this option. In fact, it can even be anything else. So if you have something a bit more advanced, you could even have a minimap. Like imagine you have maybe a long read, long article that you want people to maybe explore. So why not allow people to scan between it or kind of jump in, in different parts of it and bookmark different locations in that list? We could do the same with infinite scroll, by the way, as well. That would be great. It's like bookmarking products that people can actually jump back to them whenever they want to. That's great, right? Anybody excited about this so far? Ah, here we go. Excellent. I have 9 minutes left, and I have to go for this because this is horror on earth. We need to fix this for good, right? And I want to show a couple of things which really worked well. So I highly encourage you to try them out. This is the one that doesn't work. So when we talk about hover menus, this is a pain. Oh my, this is so painful. So if you have nested levels, like level 1, level 2, level 3, and you think, okay, I'm just going to show some navigation on hover, right? So allowing people to jump from page 1 to level 3 or level 4 even, this is going to be a disaster. I mean, there are ways and techniques to make it work better, but this is such a pain. Anybody been in this situation before? This is horror. This is the worst thing you can do to your e-commerce site, right? Unfortunately, many sites are operating just like that. Here's dictionary.com, and can you spot what happens here? Yeah, the flashes, right? It's probably very easy to spot on the screen, right? So every time you move or you put an interactive element on top of your mega menu, hover menu, this is going to be trouble. So this is not going to work. And of course, over the years, we learned how to fix it, right? We can say, oh, no problem. We're just going to have a little delay, right? So when we do a delay like this, there is another problem that shows up. What is the problem here? You can click. You don't know if you can click on it, if it's going to be linked driving you to a section or not, right? Yeah, for some people, this will show up too quickly. For other people, it will show up too slowly, right? And here, in fact, whenever you actually hover, you need to wait and sit on it, right, in order for that thing to appear. And one thing that I learned in user testing is to really observe what people are doing, but really frame by frame. So I would record a screen like this, and I would go frame by frame to understand what exactly is happening. And so here we have this transition from background and also movement from top to bottom, right? Which is unnecessary, maybe, and maybe should be operating on click rather than on hover. Another option that some people are using is this triangle pattern that Amazon has developed many years ago, where as long as people are staying or users are staying within the triangle, well, then we keep the panel open. But this opens the gate for complexity. Because once you get in there, you need to make it responsive, right? And so some people started working on SVG exit path areas technique, where the idea is this. We need to be a bit more precise, right, in our click area, and we need to make sure it's responsive, right? So it actually works well on mobile screen, on smaller screens, on larger screens, and so on. And so we really need to be very careful about calculating that path, where the person is going to be. So we're showing that menu, or these details and so on, only when it's needed. So the rest of the content is not going to be covered. And if somebody clicks on an area outside of this thing, then it's actually going to work as well. This is really difficult to build. It's not straightforward. And you know what's much easier to build? If we compare, let's say, this, well, the easiest thing would be to actually build something that's just, much simpler, and that would be just clicking on, just operating on tab. So whenever you click on the menu item, be it on the left, be it on the right, it doesn't matter, you just go ahead and it opens and collapses when you close it. That's it. And you might say, well, this is surely slower, because again, on how it appears right away, now you have to click. Yes, but this is actually more predictable. This is indeed slower, but people make fewer mistakes as a result. So this works really better. But one thing we really need to be careful about is the slide-in experience we get on mobile. This is a big trouble. If you can avoid it, we probably should. What do I mean by that? When you look on the left, right, have the menu, it opens up, we click on one of the items, and then we have this slide-in from right to left. This performs the worst. In the testing that I was doing, This kind of menu is absolute disaster. If you can avoid it, it's probably a good idea to do that. Anybody has this kind of menu? It's okay, it's a safe space, right? So if you can, I would challenge you to replace it and test how well it would perform. What are the options we have? Well, we can actually surely make it a bit nicer. Maybe like this, where you have enough contrast between the first level, second level, third level, and so on. Like it's done here. It's a bit better, but we still have the slide in, slide out, right? But one thing I highly encourage you to test and to figure out if it's actually working better, if you want to make sure that people understand how this works, even if you do have the slide in and slide out, make sure that the last level, is going to be a different interaction mode. So you kind of move and switch in the last step to accordion. But if you can, I would even go further than that. And namely, I would say, let me just jump right there, right? I would say accordions all the way. You have first level, you have second level, you have third level. It works, from my experience, it works up to 4 levels. No problems there. Because with this design, which is like the simplest thing ever, right? You can do something you can never do in other examples. Namely, what can you do? Let me just jump back here. You never have to go back to go forward. Whenever you have slide in, slide out, you always have to go back in order to go deep in another level. This is always going to be slower. This one, you can actually jump very quickly between different levels without having to go back. In fact, you can even improve it further than that. I have no idea how much. Oh, I have 4 minutes 30. Excellent. I had 4 more minutes. I'm so excited about this, right? So that works. So I would highly encourage you to try that. But even better than this, what we could do is try a different approach altogether. So we have navigation, we have search, but what if we have some sort of a mix of both, which is the so-called navigation queries, where the idea is, when somebody comes to a page, we can allow them to be very deliberate and say what their intent is, so they can jump right to the page that they're interested in. So you choose one thing, you choose another thing, you choose a third thing, and then you get where you want to go. And surely it works for simple websites like this, but this is a government website from Germany, Düsseldorf, where I just happened to live for a while. You select one thing, you select another thing, instead of using this complex navigation that they have, instead of using this complex search that they have, you just get straight to the page where you need to be. That's great. Here, incredible results. Incredible. AO.com, or AO.de at this point, the first big page, right? What do you want to do here? Choose a device, choose the size of that device, right here. Choose your pricing range. That's it. 12 seconds is the time to relevance here. You will never, ever be able to reach that time to relevance with usual filters or usual search. It's impossible, right? If you do this, you get the incredible time to relevance. Now, it's important, of course, that people actually find something relevant in your search results. If you don't have any reasonable product that people are interested in, you will never be able to hit that well, right? But this is incredible timing. Right? And again, talking about design KPIs, as I mentioned in the beginning, is really, really important to understand that this is better in many different ways. Right? Of course, another thing you could do is to introduce different views. So this is another big institution in a ministry, an employment agency in Germany, and they have these little tabs for different roles that you have on the site. And they have this click menu, so it's not a hover menu. So if you have different distinct roles, you might want to give them slightly different navigation. That could work. And how would it look like on mobile? The same story. You have the steps, and you can swipe in between them, right? But you can do a little bit more. Everything changed for me when I discovered this site. One day, it was a Sunday night, I remember this vividly. I remember going through all the football club websites in England. Anybody does that for a living? Like, it's fun, right? It's fun. It's great. And I found LCFC. And LCFC does something that only rarely can be found in other websites too. So if you think about this kind of navigation, right? Obviously, you click on the menu shows up, not a big deal. And then you get these sections here. Matches, teams, news, and so on, right? Now, what you want to do is to allow people to explore, to see what is available on that site, and also be able to navigate between levels very quickly. How can we do that? Well, instead of using accordions, instead of using this slide in, slide out, why don't we do this? So you show multiple levels at the same time. And of course, if you had, let's say, level 3, you could do the same for level 2, where everything would slide in, maybe, from right to left. But it would allow people to navigate between multiple siblings of the same category very, very quickly. That's incredible. That's really, really nice. If you need lengthier labels, it might take 2 lines. That's not a problem. That works just fine. In fact, when you start looking around, you'll find a couple of examples like this. Here's one from the US, right? Kind of the same story. The first attempt of doing that is kind of very similar in this case, right? When you click, here we go, it appears. Then I was working with cancer decay a while back. Kind of they just try to have these multiple columns to make best use of the available space. And here's one from PlayStation, where they don't use labels, but they use these icons to indicate the type of products. So as you click on one of them, you can still navigate very quickly between the other groups as well. Remarkable, it works really, really well. Just 2 more minutes, I promise, right? And then one thing that I really highly advise you to do is to invest in breadcrumbs. Anybody excited about breadcrumbs? Yes, I have fans of breadcrumbs. And I couldn't leave for, I don't know, 2 days. I just couldn't get it. Why on earth would you do this to websites? Why would breadcrumbs show in the wrong place? Well, it doesn't make sense to me, right? I mean, it may be actually perfectly fine from, again, Hebrew perspective, but this is just really, really surprising. And when I started looking, I decided to go through, on a random Thursday night, I decided to go to Dutch insurance companies, which is also fun. And then I found this. Why is everything showing on the left in Dutch websites? It's just very surprising. And then sometimes you see disabled breadcrumbs. Why are they disabled? What did they do to you? I just don't get that. So what's the deal with this? So why would you make this breadcrumbs disabled? So you can click anywhere, but not the previous sections. And sometimes they would land in the footer. Why do you put this in the footer? It's like it needs to be there, like all the way visible. But then I found one insurance, and then of course you get this, which is also very confusing. This is breadcrumbs, but multi-breadcrumbs kind of thing. It's kind of really requires a bit of effort to understand how this actually works. So it's not straightforward, and sometimes it's just a little bit too much. Do you understand the breadcrumbs here? Difficult, so we have to really do some testing. But then I found 2 sites, and this is going to be the end of it, right? One of them is European Commission website. This is something that I feel very comfortable with because I'm working with European institutions, right? And then they had this accordion for breadcrumbs. So if you need to jump, it might be not as obvious though. So if you need to jump, you can actually open this accordion and then this entire path expands. That's cool. But then I found this, which is a German car insurance company, and they had this thing on the top. That's the day when everything changed for me. Everything. And I mean it. Because this is something that I will highly encourage you to do, because then the next time I started working on it, we tested it everywhere. That's when breadcrumbs meet navigation. You can remove your mega drop-downs altogether if you replace it with drop-downs on each level instead of just simple static breadcrumbs. The way it works is, by the way, very simple, as we would be expecting it. So whenever you click, you see this level showing up. It's actually exactly the same on mobile as well, right? And so you can actually play with it a lot. And then I go to another website, which I absolutely love, and I'm sure that you will too. It's the website of a Confederation Switzerland Federal Statistical Office, FDHAFSO, which is a great little website. I highly recommend you to visit. It's really, really nice. It's really well designed. They went all the way. Like, look at the top. It's like breadcrumbs all the way. And when I saw this, I thought, do we need mega drop-down in the first place? Do we actually show this navigation like that? Maybe we do to show like all across everything like at once, but this is actually a pretty good idea to have. Another thing that they're trying to play with is this idea where we're on top of the additionally to navigation that you have, they also show these options, right? Might not be ideally kind of designed here, but it's also a prototype, right? So you kind of get to all the side levels very, very quickly. That's really, really impressive. Okay, I'm totally out of time, and I don't want to hijack, because I'm still going to be available for all the questions that you have. But I want to finish with just one little thing, right? We know what people like. People like when things are predictable, fast, large, easy to type, focus states, active states, nothing fancy. We can go on this forever. In fact, we'll have a lot of stuff that we'll be covering tomorrow on that. I even kind of created this video course that you can actually watch if you're interested. Oh. Back? Oh, sorry, people. Okay, so here we go. All right. So I recorded this video course, which is 8 hours long, with a lot of stuff, a lot of patterns like this. It's called smartinterfacedesignpatterns.com. It's a very long URL, but I hope you will find it maybe useful as well. There's tons of stuff there, but we can really do incredible things. That's the one thing, final thing I want to show. Even something as boring, as stupid and strange like a pop-up can be incredible. This is the best pop-up I've seen in ages. I wish this pop-up was everywhere. It's so annoying, it's so frustrating, it's so difficult to close. It's great. It's fantastic. You know, and you of course also remember like there are all these websites where they're being told like type in the date of birth and all of that. Well, make it a bit more exciting for people. You come to Austin Beer Works, you're being asked, are you 21? And if you say no, let's have a conversation. 17? 16? Just keeps going. It's easy to do. It's not that it doesn't require any sophisticated tools or anything. Well, at some point you're locked. You cannot get away from it. And then you have to click on no to discover what's expecting you. What's expecting you is, of course, a friendly fella giving you a look, right? And every single yes and no scenario will get a slightly different URL, of course, right? And even something really, really simple like this, where you have a title, like what could be more boring in the world than title, Mr., Miss, Mrs., so on and so forth. You can make it exciting for people. Like make it a journey. Who would you like to be today? Would you like to be a colonel, right? I don't know, princess? You just get the delivery to your doorsteps where you're going to say, you know, Princess Maria or something like that. It'll be exciting. There are 56 options in there to choose from. That's seriously impressive. And we kind of saw already this, right? Where you had this little fella or something like that, kind of a little bit of gamification. I think very often we tend to think, oh, we should not make people think. But maybe there is a point of making things slowing down a little bit so people have at least an opportunity to connect with your brand or with you personally, right? It's very respectful, I have to say. That's very nice. It's great, right? And finally, there is nothing wrong in making people wait every now and again, just, you know, as long as it looks cute and cool and all. And if you want people to subscribe to your newsletter, maybe I challenge you to test just how well something like this would perform. If you make it a bit harder for people to subscribe to your newsletter, maybe like this. So maybe make people tap 5 times, or 7 times, or 27 times in order to sign up for your newsletter. Then you will get a person who really wants to pay attention to you, right? Now, this character is actually quite opinionated on that, right? So this is not difficult to do, but this can actually have tremendous impact. So with this in mind, I have some cats and more cats. And Meow, and thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure. Avi, how are you doing today?
Oh, wow. Thank you. Wow, that was incredible. Thank you, Vitaly. Thank you
pleasure.
for all for coming. We actually have to go from this door, right here, the exit. Don't go upstairs because there's another event already. So that's it. We're out of time. Unfortunately, we'll see you next year.
Oh, tomorrow.
Tomorrow in the workshop. If you don't want the necktie, please recycle it. There's a box outside to recycle these neckties.
Yes.
That's
And
it.
thank you so much, everyone, for coming. See you tomorrow next year, maybe, hopefully. And thanks for speakers for coming as well, and everybody who is running around here, volunteering and all of that. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yes, thank you for everyone.